Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program dedicated to preserving Wadsworth history and designed for the Wadsworth Area Historical Association. I'm Cesar Carino, your host, and our guest today is Eileen Thomas Berkey. Eileen, I probably have known you as many years as I've been born.
I believe so,
because you were kind of our neighbor there. Now, in Silver Creek, where we were born, neighbors could be anywhere from right next door to a mile and a half away, and that's where you lived.
That's right.
But at that time, there were only about 4 or 5 houses between the two of us. Eileen, tell us a little bit about, we'll start with Eileen. You're the youngest in the family.
Yes.
And the only remaining Thomas sibling.
That's right.
Go from Eileen all the way up to Willard and tell us who they are and what their names were. You're the only girls. I know that one for a fact.
That's right. I'm the only girl, and I had 5 older brothers.
Their names, and you know, they're all gone now.
Start with the youngest, you
yeah.
mean. Leonard was my youngest brother, and then there was Glenn.
And when was Leonard born?
In 1909.
1909, and you were born in 1921, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of space between the two of you, right? Mm-hmm.
And then my next brother was Glenn.
And Glenn?
He was born in 1905.
1905.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then Wayne, he was born in 1902.
1902.
Did I say when Leonard was born? 1909.
1909 for Leonard, right? And then Wayne 1902, and then.
And then
Harold.
Harold was in 1899.
1999.
And Willard in 1898.
98.
So he was 23 years older than me when I was born.
So you knew them as adults almost when they were born. And who were your parents? Tell us who your parents were, and then we're going to start with the history of where you live right now, the farm where you live right now, and dating back probably 150 or so years, your ancestry there.
That's right. You want to know my parents?
Yes, let's start with your mother.
My mother was Mamie Lucas Thomas.
Her real name was Mary, though, right?
Mary Catherine, but she always went by Mamie.
I didn't know that her name was Mary Catherine until I saw it on an official document.
And then my dad was Lewis Thomas, and I married. Is that next? I married.
Well, how about telling us when your mother was born, when your father was born?
Okay, my mother was born in 1879, and my dad was born in 1874.
1874.
He was born at Thomastown.
Thomastown, which is where?
Akron, around the Akron
That's right,
area.
that's right. Thomastown is off Wilburth Road right now. There used to be a school there called Thomastown School.
Well, that's where it was.
Right there. Then he moved here because your mother actually was the daughter of whom?
Of Sam Lucas and Susan Lucas.
And Susan Lucas's maiden name was?
Long.
Long. And tell us about the Long association with that farm and when it came on to be.
My great-grandfather, David Long, came from Westchester, Pennsylvania, and I think he was a young man then. And then when he grew older, where I live now on the farm, whole farm was just a wilderness. And so he cleared that and built a log cabin.
Do you remember what date that was that he cleared that and when he came from Westchester County, Pennsylvania?
It would have been, I know he died in 1898. So I just...
Probably in the 50s, 1850,
yes,
probably 150,
right.
55, 60 years ago,
That's
right?
right.
And did he own the entire farm there?
Yes, he did.
And the entire farm was probably 640 acres at that time, wasn't it?
I don't know how much it was, but when I came on the scene, why, it was 100 acres for as long as I can remember.
Right. Now, the Lucas family. Sam Lucas was your grandfather, and he married Susan Long.
That's right.
Right. Now, Sam Lucas's name runs all the way through to today here in Wadsworth. Tell us a little bit about Sam Lucas and his descendants. Mamie is your mother.
Mamie was my mother, and then Russell Lucas was Sam's son, and Tommy Lucas,
Tommy Lucas, who was, of course, the chief of police here in Wadsworth.
and the mayor.
And the mayor, that's right. And he was actually he was a marshal and a constable
Yes, he was.
in the 1900s, early 1900s, 1902, 3, 4,
That's
somewhere,
right.
something like that. And then he followed all the way through. And of course, the Lucas family is still here in town. And we had one of the Lucas boys on here, not too well, more years now that I'm prepared to remember, but they actually built a little community in South Wadsworth.
That's right.
Off Lyman Street, and several of them are still there, and of course the descendants are still there. And Tommy Lucas's grandson was a policeman,
That's right.
and his great-grandson is a policeman right now.
That's right.
When I was mayor, I had the privilege of actually swearing in the great-grandson.
Oh,
Tommy Lucas's great-grandson. So we have policemen all the way down through there.
That's
Tell us a little bit now about Eileen and your family. You married
Clark Berkey.
Clark Berkey. When did you get married?
In 1947.
47, right after a big battle,
That's
called
right.
the World War II. And where did you meet Clark?
Well, I was working at the Ohio Match office, and he was born in Sterling, but he had come to Wadsworth to stay at his aunt's.
And who was his aunt at the time? Because she's gone now.
Yeah, the Paul and Fern Mann, and he stayed there. And then I knew their daughter, Bee, and through her
Beatrice Mann. Now, how did you know Beatrice? You went to...
we worked together at the match
At the match shop, right. And you say that you worked, and we're going to get back to the family relationships here, but before we get off the match shop here, tell us what office you worked with and with whom you worked, and who some of the people were with whom you worked.
Well, I worked in the bookkeeping department, and Bill Simister was my boss. I worked with Ruth Liebert, and let's see.
And Ruth Leiber's family is big in town. I wish that they were all living so I can get them, but now even some of the younger ones are gone.
Worked with Alvera Patty. You know her,
Oh,
I'm
surely.
sure.
Alvera Chupa. Those are maiden names,
That's
Chupa.
right. And, let's see, there was girls from Seville, Joanne Short and Norma Detweiler.
And the Detweilers have lots of relatives here, too.
That's right.
Pauline, as a matter of fact, your aunt, or rather your sister-in-law, wasn't she a Detweiler?
Pauline?
Pauline?
No,
She was a Durhammer. I'm sorry, that's right, yeah.
Right, she was a Durhammer.
Right.
Yeah, so, all right, well, I don't know. Harry Bowers worked in that office. I don't know if you
Oh, yes, I remember him, too. Now, the biggie, how much did you make a week?
Oh, dear, I should have checked that. I have looked at it not too long ago, but it wasn't very much.
I think it's about $21 a week, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't over 30, I don't
Oh, yeah,
believe.
$30 a week. That was something.
Well,
And
that was my first job, and I thought it was great. So,
You bet. In those days, it was pretty great. Now, let's go back to your family relationships and start with Clark. He was a friend of Beatrice Mann.
he was a cousin.
A cousin? Oh, a cousin would be, okay. So then she introduced you?
Yes, That was in 1946.
Was it love at first sight, or did you have
I
to
think it was,
Yeah. Well, Clark, as we all know, is gone now, unfortunately, but he spent many years with the city.
Yes.
Wonderful person, just a great person. And then you were married in 1946.
47.
47. Where?
At the Emmanuel United Church of Christ,
Right, which
better
is your
known
church.
as the High Church.
High Church, and that's where you are.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, you still go there, do you not?
Yes.
Now tell us a little bit about that marriage. Today I just saw last night, I was watching television, and a mother was saying, so we have cut the wedding expenses down, so we're at $113,000 now. Did you think that you spent $113,000?
No. Maybe not 113, but anyhow, no, it was a small wedding. We just had our family and relatives.
And who was your best man and maid of honor?
Well, Pauline, my sister-in-law, Pauline Thomas.
Pauline
And
dear
then
Henry
Clark's
Thomas.
brother was the best man.
Best man. And who married you?
Reverend J.H. Petter, and I know
J.F. Petter.
Petters are known in this.
Right. We still have Petters here in town. And we have interviewed, as a matter of fact, one of the Petters already on this program. And do you remember who played the organ for you at that time?
We didn't have an organ. We only had a piano.
Piano. And who played for it?
And my niece, Marge
Thomas. Marge Thomas.
Wickheiser.
Wickheiser, presently now. Marge would be approximately 76 years old now, wouldn't she? Yeah, about that time. And you were born 1921, so that makes you 83 years of age, right?
Yes, it does.
That really does. Now, children. Let's hear about the children.
All right. Susan Vanek is her married name.
Vanek?
Vanek.
Spell it V-A-N-E-I-K.
I-K.
We always like to spell those names because many times as we read about Wadsworth history, we have 3 or 4 different spellings. And I was determined that if we did anything at all for oral history in Wadsworth, that we would spell every name so that it would be the same thing all the way through. So Susan Vanek, where does Susan live?
Susan lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. She and her husband, Carol. And in fact, her birthday is today, so this is going to be her birthday present.
Her birthday present is today, and I'm going to say today is August the 17th, 2004, so she is probably close to 50 years old, isn't she?
Oh, a little more than that.
But you don't say more when it's a girl or woman.
All right, so I can't tell her age?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'm proud of it anyway. She was born in 58, so...
48.
I mean 48,
Yeah.
so she's 56.
56 years of age, that's right, yep. And she has children?
No, she has no
children. Okay. Then who's the second daughter?
That's Pat.
Pat.
You know Pat.
Oh, I know all of them.
Yes, and she lives she lives over close to Copley.
And what is her married name?
She's not married.
Oh, she's not married, okay.
No, Susan's the only one.
Oh, okay. And then your baby daughter?
Is Ann.
Ann.
And she lives in Akron when she isn't at my house. And then I have one grandson, Lucas.
And that brings back the family name of the Lucas people.
Yes, only they spelled it with a K, and I always wished it would have been with a C.
So it'd be the same thing,
But
right?
he likes to be called Luke, so that works out anyhow.
That works out okay. Let's go back to the farm now. So that we'll have for posterity the exact location of the farm. It's bordered by the South County Line Road, which is called Eastern Road, and the East County Line Road, which is called Medina County Line Road. Now those, pardon me, those roads will probably be here 100 years from now, but you never can tell because everything changes. We can go up and down the street one day and 2 days later it's changed. However, that happens to be the last farm in the Connecticut Western Reserve.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. The boundary line for the Connecticut Western Reserve goes all the way to the Pennsylvania border, but the southernmost boundary line for the Connecticut Western Reserve is Medina County Line Road, and of course you were right on that.
Yes.
Now, we have a lot of evidence that the Sam Lucas was heavily involved with farming. We know that for a fact. Was he involved with anything else?
With building.
With building.
Yes.
And what did he build?
What did he build?
Yes.
Well, he built quite a few houses in the, along the railroad tracks down on Derling Drive, on Berkey Street. In fact, they called that Lucastown.
Lucastown,
named
right.
after him. And I'm sure he built, I wish I would have really checked on this, but he built quite a few places around.
He was a house builder.
Yes, and he was really known for making easy terms so young people could buy houses.
When at that time they probably didn't pay more than $2,000 or $3,000 for a house.
And he would make it.
Now an affordable house is $145,000.
That's right.
Wow.
Difference.
A big difference. Well, a little bit more about your high school days. You know, at one time you were the last person in the school district You lived farthest from the school district than any other person.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, you did.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
So.
you were the very, very last person. Now, what about the activities? You lived on a farm, and you had 5 brothers, and those 5 brothers probably went out and did the chores and so forth and so on. But did you have a lot of spare time to do the kinds of things kids do today?
Oh, I can't say that I did. I mean, I tried to help my mother quite a bit, and there wasn't as many activities either as there is today, of course. So.
During the Depression, about the only activity was just talking with one another.
Right.
That's all you could afford to do.
When there was something going on, I had very good brothers that drove me.
Drove you. Now, you learned how to drive, didn't you?
Oh, I did.
And that was something somewhat unusual for girls that day.
That's
that day. And I can still remember that you would go up the road driving, and people admiring the fact that Eileen knows how to drive a car. And that was really something.
Well, I think I started in 1936.
Without a license.
Probably,
yeah. Because
I didn't have a license because I remember I was so thrilled that when I got my license. But I drove a old car of Sam Stanley's.
Right, and a Model T Ford?
No, it was a Chevy of some kind.
Oh, a Chevy?
Yeah.
And Sam Stanley was a neighbor and a good friend, was he not?
Right.
Matter of fact, he and your brother Harold were very close friends.
And then his mother and Mrs. Amwig and my mother were very good friends.
Yes, Maud Amwig. A little aside, you may or may not remember this. Sam Stanley was married after his mother died. He was in his 60s, and he married Julia Hanshy. And he wrote a postcard to Harold. Do you remember that postcard?
No, I don't.
He said, he's on his honeymoon. Having a wonderful time. Glad you're not here.
Oh, no, I don't remember that, but that sounds like him.
Yes, it does. It surely does sound like him. The schoolmates, who were your good friends?
My very best friend, and we are still very close friends, is Mary Evelyn Newcomer. I don't know if you remember her.
Yes, Shirley down in Custard Hook.
No, Acme over.
Mary Ellen Newcomer. Yes, I'm sorry.
And then she married Jay Buffington.
Yes,
of course.
right.
And we still talk regularly, and when we can, we have lunch together, and we've been friends since the 1st grade.
And you went to 1st grade. What school?
At Centralized.
Centralized. And who was the teacher?
Miss Zahner.
Mrs. Ainer.
Zahner, Miss Zahner. Do you remember her?
Well, no, she was gone by the time that I got there, a bit later. Some of them had Mrs. Gates, I believe.
Was she 2nd or 1st grade? I don't.
She was 1st grade because she taught us how to speak English.
Oh. Well, I had Miss Zahner in the 1st grade. You remember Mrs. Vining?
Oh, very well. Harriet May Vining, right? And you had her then, too?
Yes,
Of course, these people are all gone. They would be probably 150 well, not 150 years old, but 130 or 40 years old.
Yes, they would be.
Easily. They were old when we knew them.
Yes, they were.
Right. And the principal at that time was?
Well, when I first started, let's see, who was the principal? Oh, Mr. Vining.
Mr. Vining.
Mrs. Vining's husband.
A little on the tough side, wasn't he?
Yes, I remember that he was.
Yes.
And then, of course, it was, there was a Mr. Ewing, and it seemed like he was a principal for a while.
Yes, he was.
And then Mr. Isham.
Mr. Isham
Vernon
himself,
Isham.
and Vernon V. Isham, after whom the school is named right now. He went up to the 9th grade there, and you were Mary Ellen Newcomer's best friend at that time, and vice versa. How about some of the other playmates and people that?
Oh, there was Mary Ellen Werner and Virginia Werner, and I don't know if I can remember because Mary Evelyn is the main one that the only one that I've kept in touch with all these years. But
what about males?
Well, your brother.
Yes, Chris.
Chris, and there was Everett Perkins.
Everett Perkins, your neighbor.
That's right.
Another neighbor.
Paul Ryder.
Paul Ryder, yes, remember him.
And they just sort of leave me right now. I can't think of the names. Paul Ryder, and who else would it be? I know there was more, but.
Now, going back to the daughters again, they were born in what months?
Well, Susan was born in August.
August. What about the next one?
Pat was born in September.
And then the next one?
March.
March. And what happened when Pat was born? Was there a snowstorm?
That was when Ann was born.
Oh, when Ann was born.
In 1954. There was a Well, I had to go part way to the hospital on a tractor, you know, to get to the.
Tell us about that experience.
Well, it had snowed the whole week.
And this was in September?
March.
Oh, March.
And every night when Clark came home that week, he'd say, "Don't get any pains tonight. This is the worst night of all." So I waited till Thursday night when it was really bad. And we had to call Loyal Hollinger, who worked on the road, you know, to open up a road so we could get to Wadsworth. And Clark had parked his car down close to Eastern Road, and Mr. Geig took me on the tractor.
A neighbor across the road.
Took me on the tractor to get to the car.
Took you on the tractor
Yeah.
to get to the car.
And I was really a popular person at the hospital. They were all talking about how
I can imagine so. Not too many of you. I mean, we know of people giving birth in a taxi cab and
That's
things like
right.
that, but never on the back of the tractor. That was a story. Now, tell us a little bit about Clark's life here in Wadsworth. I alluded to it a moment ago, but tell us more about it.
Well, when he first came to Wadsworth, he worked for the Railway Express with A.C. Fisher. I don't know if you ever remember.
Yes, I do, Shirley.
He worked with A.C. Fisher for Railway Express.
And that was here in Wadsworth.
Yes,
And Mr. Fisher was a monument
Yes,
here in
I
town.
should say.
Tell us where the Railway Express was and what happened to it then finally.
Oh, well, it was down close to where, what is there now? Where the Firestone store is, down along there, the Railway Express, the office.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they used the depot at the south end.
Right, they used the depot at the south end, which of course has been torn down ever since. But tell us about the Railway Express. People in Wadsworth probably do not even know that there was a Railway Express here.
Well, there was, and he made deliveries. He drove a Railway Express truck, and then he went to from there he went to the post office.
Now, he had been in the service, though.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, he came out in 45, I think. And then he worked at the post office delivering mail for a while. And then from the post office, he went to the City of Wadsworth, where he remained for 30 years.
30 years. And what did he do for the City of Wadsworth?
Well, at the last, when he retired, he was superintendent of the street department. And then, I think he worked for probably the electric department he read meters and so forth. Electric and
And he spent a lot of time in a snowplow truck.
yes, he did.
Probably thinking to himself, I would have had this truck when Ann was born.
That's right. He would have got me out easier.
Yeah.
But anyway, and he worked there. He retired in, let's see, about 76, I think, 77.
76 and 77 he retired.
77, I think he retired.
And when did he pass on?
In 1998.
1998, what day?
On St. Patrick's Day,
March 17th, 1998. And as a matter of fact, a very good friend of his died a week later, or before, wasn't it? The week before, Harold Swain.
Oh, died the same night.
They both died the same night.
Harold Swain and Clark died on the same night.
On the 17th of 98. Yeah, that was a sad thing because
Yes,
they
it
were
was.
very close friends.
And then my nephew, Dick Thomas, passed away on St. Patrick's Day of this year.
Right. And his mother passed away.
Yeah, just 34 hours
34 hours
him.
before him. That's absolutely uncanny.
Yes, it was.
Those kinds of things happen. We're going to come back to this, but just for a moment here before we forget about it, describe Mamie Thomas. I remember Mamie Thomas as a little young child. The first time I ever drank root beer was something that your mother gave me when we went down there to visit.
I think you've told me that before.
Yes, and I had never drunk root beer, and to this day, root beer is my favorite. I don't drink much of the carbonated beverages, but many of them, but root beer is still my favorite, but I've never tasted anything that tasted so good as your mother. She made it herself, didn't she?
Well, they used to make it.
How do you make root beer?
Oh, I can't tell you. I don't know because I was too small when they were making that, but I really can't tell you how they make it.
I know that she made this root beer that I drank. This
uh-huh.
would have been, what, 70 years ago? Or no, about 65 years ago or
Yeah.
so. She made that root beer. But describe Mamie Thomas to us.
Well, you're asking her daughter now, and I think she was a very kind woman.
Extremely kind, extremely
Very
kind.
kind. And she tried to do a lot of good for people.
Mm-hmm.
She had much trouble walking.
Yeah.
She had arthritis real bad, but I think I could remember her as very kind and doing whatever she could for people. So
Now, she was not the aggressive type such as your Uncle Tommy Lucas.
no, I don't think so.
He was fearless. I mean, he would go after anybody.
Oh, that's right.
But your mother, I think, probably rarely left the farm, did she?
She what?
She rarely would leave the farm.
She didn't go a lot, no.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when she was younger and could get around better, I think she went more.
Mm-hmm.
But no, toward the last, why, she didn't get out very much.
And what about your father? Describe your dad.
Well, let's see. My dad was an old coal miner. They used to live in Silver Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Where did they live in Silver Creek?
Do you know where Reese's used to
Yes,
live?
up on the top of the hill.
Yeah, they lived in the house that Kenny Reese lived in. And of course, in those days, he was a coal miner and a coon hunter. And I don't know, he was a good old fella too, of course, my dad. But those are two things I would say that he was and then he was a farmer, you know, when they moved back down there. They lived on the farm first, and then they moved to Silver Creek for a while. I think about 3 of my brothers were born up there in Silver Creek. The rest of us were born
At the
on
farm, in the farmhouse.
But he liked to give things away from the farm produce, and he used to raise a lot of peaches, and so.
Now, brothers, describe them, what they did here in Wadsworth particularly. You had one very famous brother who
Willard
was a postmaster.
He was better known as Smoke.
Smoke Thomas.
In fact, all of my brothers had that nickname because my dad got the nickname somehow when he worked in the coal mines.
Really?
So the boys were all named Smoke, but at home we could never call him that because we wouldn't know who we were talking about. So Willard was the oldest, and he wasn't at home too much longer after I was born, you know, until, see, I was born in 21, and then he was married about in 1927. So,
well, a little bit before that, wasn't he?
27, 26, maybe.
26, yeah.
Then,
See, Margie was born in 27.
yeah, that's right. So he was married in 26. And then Harold was the next one.
Well, tell us about this postmaster. How did that happen? I mean, how did he become the postmaster? He was the assistant postmaster for years and years, was he not?
Yes.
Then how did he become postmaster?
Well, I think when some postmaster died or something.
Right, Daig died.
But I don't think he was postmaster for very long, though. He was assistant postmaster for quite a while.
And I remember his saying so many times, it's better to be the assistant postmaster because when the president leaves, they can get a new postmaster, but he can stay on as whatever he was. And I don't know what his politics were, and it doesn't make any difference, but it was a political position. The
That's
postmaster's
right.
job is a political position. So, you know, that was a good thing. He had a good living there, and very well known, and everyone just dearly loved him. Then we go to the other brothers. And
Well, Harold was the next one. And he always stayed on the farm and worked. He worked, he worked when he was younger at a coal mine, Gersensleger's coal mine, if you know where that was.
Tell us where it is.
Well, it was down where on Eastern Road.
Right.
Where I don't know who lives there now. Gardeners used to live there in that house.
But give us a geographical description of where it is so that when they write the history, maybe 50 years from now, that they'll know exactly where it is, because it would have to be on Eastern Road, west of...
east of Silver Creek.
East of Silver Creek, but west of Medina County Line Road.
That's right.
On the south side of the road.
That's right.
And about 2/3 of the way down from Silver Creek to Medina County Line Road, so probably be about 2/3 of a mile, something like that, 3/4 of a mile.
Not any farther than,
Yeah.
I don't know if it'd be quite that far, but anyhow.
Actually, the mine was on your farm, though, wasn't it?
Well, there was a mine on our farm, but the Gerstenslager mine was across across Eastern Road.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then he went to the service in '42, and when he came home, he went to the injector to work, the Ohio injector.
Now, there's a story right here. In 1942, Harold would have been 43 years old.
Uh-huh.
He went to the service. That's pretty old for a service. But what was happening at that time?
You mean?
We were at war, obviously.
We were at war,
Yeah,
uh-huh.
and they were taking people.
Yes, they were.
Up to 48 years of age. And that's one of the things that I'd like to have identified in our historical process. I was a young lad during the Second World War, but I was always my brothers were in the service in the Second World War, and I was just a bit too young to be in there. But my father had a draft card, and I was always afraid that they were going to draft him.
Oh.
Because he was not yet 48 years of age.
Uh-huh.
So that made it very difficult
Yes,
for
I'm
a little
sure.
kid, a little child, thinking that my brothers are all gone, my father's going to be gone, and I'm going to have to run the place.
That's right. Well, no, he would have been, see if he was born in,
99,
yeah, he would have been
43 years old.
43,
Yeah. So he was an older person. And he was in for,
He wasn't in very long because he thought it would be pretty good to go to the service, you know. And he wasn't in too long, so he did not like that. So then my folks got him out because they really needed him on the farm.
yeah. Mhm.
And so he went back home and helped with the farming, and then he worked at the Ohio injector.
For a good long time.
Yeah, quite a while.
Quite a long time. We wanted, before we leave Silver Creek, your neighbors on the east side of Silver Creek Road and on the north side of you.
Okay, on the east side, Swineharts lived there.
And tell us who the Swineharts were, and tell us about Helen Swinehart.
All right, I'd like to know about Helen Swinehart because she married Russell Miller from Loyal Oak.
Right.
And then he died, and they had a daughter, Susan, and then she remarried, and I can't think now what that man's name was, somebody from Wadsworth.
Wadsworth.
And
She drove a car too, didn't she?
oh, yes.
And what kind was it?
Oh, I don't remember that, but she worked at the Citizens Bank.
A gray coupe.
Was it?
Yes.
Could have been.
Terraplane, I think.
Could have been.
Not sure.
But she worked at the Citizens Bank. She
And
was-
to describe Helen Swinehart.
Well, Helen was she was a nice person, but she was a little, and her dad was such a funny man. She wore an awfully lot of makeup.
And she had long blonde hair, didn't she?
Yes, uh-huh. Sort of a flapperish like. I think none of them are around to hear this. So. But anyhow, that was Helen, and I just thought if I ever got old enough to wear as much makeup as she did, I'd be so happy.
No.
But I didn't do
You
it.
never got that old.
No.
Now, the Swineharts lived in the farm, which is now, at the present time, is being developed into farming.
Yes.
How about the people to the north of you? There's a farm north of you,
Okay, back in the lane, you mean?
way back in the lane.
That's the Ross family. Now there's,
But when you were growing up, who was
when
there?
I was growing up, it was Longs, Norm Long.
Norm Long. And tell us about Norm Long and who he was and who his children were. And they are related in some way to you, are they
No,
not?
not that long.
Not that
no,
long?
That's
Okay.
a different one, well, I was real young then, too, but there was Norm Long and his wife, Nora Long, and then they had Ethel, I can't think of them all. Ethel Long.
Chuck, Charles,
Charles, yeah, and John.
John,
And Aletha Long.
Letha Long, Boffman.
Yeah. Let's see, who else?
Well, both of them,
There was a Ruth.
Ruth Long, right. Both of the boys drove school bus. As a matter of fact, John Long, I believe, do you remember going to this? No, you would have been on the first motorized bus in 1927 when you
Yes,
started school. But before that, John Long drove horse and buggy. or horse and wagon,
Yeah,
and
that's
picked
right.
up kids.
He did.
And then Chuck Long drove the motorized ones.
And he was a driver for quite a few years.
Oh, yes.
He was a driver about as long as I went to school, I think.
Yeah. Yes, I remember he was a driver from probably 27 on. Because my brothers, my brothers
They went on the boat. He
Yeah,
went,
surely.
Chris did. And
So they would have been 1927 when they started. Yeah, they started the boat. And then, unfortunately, Norm Long, Norm Long, met an untimely death in about 39 or so, 30.
yeah, about that time,
Yeah.
I think it was.
Following the Longs who lived there, that you remember.
Well, there was,
Porter.
oh, you mean up
Oh,
there?
yes,
Yeah. The first people to live there after the Longs that I remember of was the Porters.
They had, what, 4 girls or 5?
At least, They had Eleanor Poor from Doylestown.
Right. She was my 4th grade teacher.
Oh, was she?
One of them.
And then
Joanne,
Hartman.
right.
And then there was, oh dear, there was Hester Porter, had a beauty shop in
Yeah,
Doylestown.
she was the oldest. Then Lynn.
Lynn, the only boy. And trying to think, there's another one.
There's a girl there.
Jeanette
Jeanette.
and Connie.
Connie Porter. That's right. You got them all.
I did.
You got them all. Now, if you go across the road from where you lived, and still live, and go across the road from the Porter farm, there were 2 or 3 houses there. And who were those people?
Well, Eula Seaman.
Eula Siemens. Tell us about Eula Siemens.
Well, Eula Seaman was a maiden lady, and she lived by herself. And she used to babysit for Clark and I when the kids were little. Sometimes.
Nice woman.
Yes,
Very nice
she
woman.
was. And her sister was Adina Walters that married Frank Walters. And Paul Seaman was her brother. And she had no, never had, I don't think she ever had a telephone or running water.
Or electricity.
No.
No. As a matter of fact, she had a 25-watt generator that kept her going. Do you remember when the lights or the electricity came down through the Rural Electrification Act, brought electricity to your house? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember.
Tell us about that.
Well, that was really strange. I remember we went to a high church, or the first day that we could use it, we'd gone to a lawn festival at the high church, and when my dad came home, he went completely through the house, switching every light on,
No kidding.
It was such a treat.
Do you remember what year that was?
Oh, I think it was in the late 20s or early 30s.
Yeah, the Electrification Act, I think it was 1925, and it never got down that far until probably the very, very late 20s.
Yeah.
But you do remember that, huh?
Oh, yes, I
Now,
can say.
right now, they have electricity everywhere you go.
Oh, sure.
And you have 1,000 different appliances and so forth. But I can still remember the houses having one light bulb in the middle of the room, period. That was it.
That's right.
And that did it. It wasn't a big light bulb either.
No, but it sure was nice after having.
Coal oil and things like that. So you do remember, you've come a long way from not even having electricity to having electricity, and then television, then
That's
computerization, and all these other kinds of things. Eula Siemens. Then who else lived out across there?
Well, there was a small house that, Burchett's lived in, I think. But before that, when I was born, there was people named Bennett's, an elderly well, they seemed elderly to me, man and woman, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. And I think Phrases live in that house now, one of the Frays. Tom Frays, I believe it is. Then, who else was down there? Well, of course, down at the bottom of the hill was Jacobs.
Jacobs.
Remember the Jacobs?
Harold Jacobs. I want to get
Althea?
Althea, is she still living?
I thought she was.
Well, I'd like to get Althea and Harold and
Well, Harold is gone.
not Harold, but Arlo, and see if I can get them on the program. You know, our viewers could really, really help tremendously if you would convince some of these people. How long has it been since I've been trying to get you on this program, Eileen?
Well, a couple of weeks.
No, a couple of weeks.
No.
About 4 years.
Okay.
It takes forever. I spend about 10 times more effort getting people to come to the program than I do in interviewing them, and I dearly love to interview them.
Well, now I'll tell them that it isn't all that bad because I'm enjoying this.
See there? I told you you would. I'm so glad you said that voluntarily. I didn't even ask you to say that. But you know, we have so many of these families that, and I hate to say it this way, but if we don't get them, pretty soon it's going to be too late.
That's right.
And we still have a couple of the Jacobses, and I'd love to get those people on here. I'd like to get the all of the Floods. There are 4 of the Floods still living, and Kenny's 90 years old now. I already did interview him and interviewed Betty, but I would like to get all 4 at the same time, if it's all possible.
I think they're having a big get-together this coming weekend. I think
Well,
it's
maybe
this
I can get them.
weekend.
I'll have to give them a call.
Even Ruth is coming from wherever she lives.
That's what I will. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll try to get them if I possibly can. Get all 4 of
She's
them.
the youngest of them.
Yep, and she is 1922, born 1922.
Yes.
Yes. Now, going down over the hill then, see now, when I said that we were sparsely populated, that's exactly what I meant. Because down over the hill, there were no houses until you came to the
That's
Mackeys. And the Mackeys lived on the corner of what is now Johnson Road.
No, not the corner. They lived a house or 2 down when you turn to the right.
That's right. That's right. At one time they were the corner house, but now I'm sorry. You're right. Boy, good memory. A good memory, Eileen.
Well, my folks were friends of the Mackeys.
Well, actually, we have a document that says that Mamie Lucas and Bob Mackey went to school together in the old number 9 schoolhouse. Tell us where the old number 9 schoolhouse is and tell us about it.
Well, that's a little far back for me now. I've heard of the number 9 schoolhouse, and there was one schoolhouse on Johnson
Road, right west of the furniture store right now. Slim Jackson, Jim Jackson, and Naomi Jackson lived in that, and Marietta Jackson and Lois Jackson were both born there. That house has now been remodeled completely, and you can not even identify it.
I know.
But you know, they called it the number 9 schoolhouse, but I'll swear that on the shingles there was an 11.
You know, I think you're right about that.
The number 11 schoolhouse. I think that's right, but they called it the number 9 schoolhouse. Maybe they changed names, you know.
Maybe that's right.
Later on. But when would your mother have gone to school there? She was born in 59, did you say?
No, 1879.
1879. So she would have been there probably 1885 or so.
That's right.
And they had all of the first graders listed, the second graders listed, the third graders listed, and fourth graders listed on a 3x5 card.
Yes.
So there weren't that many people there because they all went to the same one-room schoolhouse. Smoke Thomas went there as well.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember that, but your
Well,
brother.
I remember them talking about it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, he was one of the last ones to go there, and then they brought them into the city. But now we have the Mackeys, and of course June Mackey Sondels is still living in town. But tell us about the relationship between Mamie Thomas and the Mackeys. I mean,
they're not related, really.
I know, but I mean the association, I should say, not the relationship.
Well, let's see. I think one of my brothers was a good friend of one of the Mackey boys, but well, see, my folks used to live in Silver Creek for a while, and then I think that's how they probably got acquainted with the Mackeys, but I don't know when that started. So, but they were good friends. So.
And then you go down a couple more houses, and your old classmate Everett Perkins.
Yes.
Now we have interviewed him. We interviewed him about 6 or 7 years ago. But What do you remember about that part of your high school where Everett was a football star? And
High school, he was a football star. And what else can I say for him? I don't know, but I mean, I just knew him all the time we went
Yeah.
to school.
Well, you probably knew him all your life.
That's right.
And he's still doing quite well. We want to go now to the Berkey side. Tell us a little bit more about Clark's family.
Well, Clark was born in Sterling,
Right.
and he lived there until he went to the service in about 41 or 42. And he farmed. He loved the farm, so they had a farm down by Sterling.
And his brothers and sisters, tell us about those people.
And he had 3 brothers.
And their names were?
There was Woodrow, Andrew, and Carl.
Mm-hmm.
And Carl is the only one living. And he had 2 sisters, Evelyn and Lily. And they all were hard workers. They were very hard
Oh, you bet they were.
Dad-
Of course, you know, in those days, there were no choices.
No, there wasn't. And he had, they had a big farm too, and so, of course, the boys and the father run it, and the girls helped in the house. There was a lot of work in the house,
You bet.
know, and so they helped in the house till they both went to work. I think it was at the Ohio Salt
In Redmond.
offices, yeah.
In the offices, right. When you graduated from high school, things were pretty bleak.
Yes, they were.
We were coming into the 10th year, or actually, we're in the 10th year of a depression. And things were not good financially for the whole world, or for the whole nation. We began hearing some rumblings about war and so forth. When I ask the question to younger people now, if I talk with them, I say, what were your thoughts when you were going across the stage? And they'll say, well, I'm thinking of going to college and thinking of taking a trip to Thailand before, or thinking of something really exotic. What thoughts did you have, having gone through 10 years of almost destitute life? Now, you might have been better off because you had a farm, you had a food at least, but there was no money. I mean, there's no money anywhere. And what was going through your mind when you graduated? Now, some of the boys, we knew what was going through their mind because there was a war starting, but what about the girls? What were they?
Well, I don't know. I always admired the work that nurses do, so I thought I might want to become a nurse. But as I looked into it farther, and after I was in the hospital for a spell, I decided that wasn't for me.
No.
Then I was just thinking about getting a job, you know, that was
And how did you get that first job? Jobs were hard to get.
they were hard to
Very
get.
hard to get. How did you get that first job at the mat shop?
But God bless Bill Simister and my brother Smoke Willard. They were very good friends, and so I had gone to the Barberton School of Commerce a while, and so that's how I got in.
Now, when you talk about Bill Simmons, or Bill Simmons, Simister, wasn't one of his sons in your class too?
Don, that was
Don.
killed in the service.
Yeah, he was killed in the service. It's horrible. But you got in through that way then.
It wasn't easy to get jobs at that
Oh,
time. So.
no, absolutely not. It was very difficult. Who were the big shots of the mat shop at the time?
Well, the
President.
Don Young.
Don Young.
Don Young, and well, Don Young is the main one. That's what I.
And you were right there in the same building where he
Yes.
was. And they didn't have spacious offices.
No,
at that,
they didn't. They had small offices.
Small offices, and they're lucky to have those. Do you remember, say, for instance, the vice president?
Oh dear, let me see. I should remember. And now I cannot think of it. I'm 83, Caesar.
I know you're 83. I know how old you are because I just add a couple of years to my age.
You know, I can't think who the vice president.
Oh, it'll come to us in a
Yeah.
couple of seconds, right. And then you drove a car. Impossible. Where did you get a car?
Well, Sam Stanley, who was a very close friend of my brother Harold, was getting a new car, and he had this old sort of a wreck it was, but I was real glad to get
What kind was it, do you remember?
I think it was a Chevy, some kind of a Chevy, and I was thrilled to death with it.
Was it a big black one?
You know, I think it might have been black, but I think it was a greenish color when I got it, unless he had it painted, you know, or something.
But it was an older car.
Yes, it was. And the fenders were a little rotted on it.
And how old do you think, what year do you think the car was?
Well, that was in about 40, so it would have been at least early 30s, I guess.
Early 30s, right, on a Chevy. And you got that car. Do you remember what you paid for a car?
You know, well, it wasn't very much.
Oh, I'm sure not.
Maybe $300 for that old car.
If that,
yeah,
because brand new, they were only about $525,
yeah. So maybe just a couple $100, I don't know.
He had got himself a 37 Chevy Coupe.
Oh, was that right?
Yes. And I still remember that. And then he got a 1941 Chevy after that.
Well, the 37, of course, maybe that was, was it new, do you know?
No, it was not new.
Well, then maybe that's the one I had.
The 37 Chevy was a blue Chevy.
Yeah, that might have been.
Coupe, yeah. And one of the biggest problems the cities have now, and churches as well as factories, is parking space. Did you have any trouble parking?
No, you mean at the match?
Yes.
No, no trouble.
Why not?
I guess there weren't that many cars.
Everyone walked.
A lot of people walked.
Yes, as a matter of fact, most people who worked at the match tried to build houses or buy houses right there, and they would go home for lunch. They would walk home for lunch.
Well, I know a lot of people walked.
They would walk home. As a matter of fact, at 3:30 when the match was let out, the Injector Hill was just a mass of humanity from both places. Well, 3 o'clock for one and 3:30 for the other. A mass of humanity
That's
coming
right.
up the hill like that and going down the same way. Some time later or earlier, I interviewed, and I can't think of who it was right now. And I said, "What did you do for lunch?" And I'm going to ask you what you did for lunch, and then I'll tell you what she did for lunch.
Okay. Well, I carried my lunch for a while, but I like to eat out so well, so then we started going, maybe to Stishers.
Stishers?
Stishers.
And what did you buy, and how much did it cost?
Oh, hamburgers were like maybe a quarter.
Quarter.
And they were good.
Yes, they were. Stishers was right adjacent, well, not adjacent to, but Garfield Street, and
That's
then Stishers right there in the corner, and they had little hamburger place. It's exactly what she did as well. And she remembers when she first started there that the hamburgers were a nickel.
Well, they might have been. They weren't a quarter, I don't think, even.
They were a nickel. And they were very, very good.
They were very good.
Yeah. And that was a good meal for anyone, particularly.
That's right.
But, for that. Income tax. Did you have to pay income tax?
Yes, I did. I thought it was pretty bad.
And how much of your pay went to income tax?
Oh, I wish you would have told me. I would have looked these things up because I can't remember. Oh, one time, I shouldn't even tell this, but I tried to figure my own income tax, and I thought I had to pay $100, and it turned out I got $100 refund.
That was wonderful. That was good.
Yeah, so I can't tell you, really. I don't
Well, so this will help. In 1942,
Excuse me.
I got a job, and I had to pay tax. My job was $25 a week, and that was, well, 40 hours. So you know how much money I was making a week. This is in the summertime. And I got $23.70. So I paid, actually, $1.30 for income tax.
Oh, out of that.
Yeah, so it's probably a 4 or 5%, something like that. But that was a lot of money in those days.
That's
a lot of money in
right.
those days. What? I'm going to ask these embarrassing questions now, Eileen. Oh. In high school, your male friends, did you have any?
Well, yes, I had a crush on Stacy Douglas, if you remember.
Stacy Douglas. Oh, yes, I do remember him.
And I don't know too many. Couldn't remember their names, I guess.
And you still maintained a good, strong relationship with Marietta Newcomer, though.
Oh.
But did you have other friends in high school?
Oh, yes,
And who were some of them?
Well, let's see, in my class there was, we had a bridge club when we graduated from high school. These were friends in high school. Then there was Evelyn Overholt.
Evelyn Overholt,
Justine
High Street.
Williams.
Justine Williams, right.
And Charlotte Overholt.
Charlotte, were they related? No.
They were cousins.
Cousins, yeah.
And Jane Baum, did I say that?
No, you haven't said Jane yet.
Yeah, and Betty Standen and Mary Evelyn and I. I can't remember any more that were in it.
Well, that's
we didn't last very long because bridge wasn't really.
No, it wasn't a big thing at that time, no. Staying there in high school, some of the favorite teachers that you had?
Oh my, you're asking me 65 years ago, you know.
More than that.
Well, when I graduated.
Oh, I see,
65
okay.
years. Oh, there was, I'm trying to think of some.
J.T. Lape, maybe?
Pardon me?
J.T. Lape, you remember him?
Oh, yes, I remember him. I don't think I had him.
You didn't have him?
I didn't have him for anybody. I had Morning Star, Mr.
Morning Star.
Chester, no, Chester Hawk.
Lloyd Morning Star.
Morning Star. Chester Hawk. And a lady teacher.
Williams.
Mrs. Williams, Ann
Miss.
Williams.
Miss.
Williams. Ann Williams and Billman, the French teacher, Miss Billman.
Miss Billman.
Yeah, so
So you remember all of those people?
I remember sort of some of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, O.J. Work
Oh, yes.
and Frank Close, the superintendent Frank Close and O.J. Work, the principal. Do you remember who the secretary was at the time? A friend of yours today yet?
The secretary.
Yeah, she was one of your neighbors. Well, not really a neighbor. She lived 2 miles from you.
What,
Donna
Bergner. Donna Lind.
Donna Lind.
Now, she passed away.
Yeah, she's passed away, but she was,
Yeah.
in 1927, she started working there.
Oh, I think that's right.
Yeah, so she was there at that time.
Doris Murray worked there in later years when my kids were going to school.
Right, from Drilling Drive, Doris Murray from Drilling
Doris
Drive.
Parkinson, she was.
Yeah.
Then, I can't think of any more
Do
secretaries.
you remember the custodian?
I'm thinking of Central High School. It was Mr. Storm. You probably.
Oh, yes.
Do you
Mr.
remember
Storm,
him?
right.
Well, they had more than one custodian, though.
Was Mr. Cheney still there at the time, Mr. Cheney?
I don't remember him.
But Mr. Storm. Tell us a little bit about the oddities, well, not the oddities, but, you know, the personality of Mr. Storm at Centralized, the custodian there.
Well, I don't know, but to me, he always seemed, well, I was a little bit shy, but he always seemed a little cross to me. Was he cross?
Well, yes. Stern.
Yes,
Yeah,
Stern
very
would
stern.
be it.
Very stern. What about, you know, all he did, I mean, the only person in the entire school was that person. He didn't have any help. He had to clean, he had to wind the clocks, he had to do the lawn, he had to do the shoveling, he had to do absolutely everything. Maybe that's why he was so stern.
That might have been.
But they didn't have a whole lot of, but you know, there were a lot of students at Centralized at
That's
that time.
right.
Yeah, we had 9 grades, and there were at least 300 to 400 people there at that time, and the building was spacious, was big. And they even had an outside building, the chicken coop where they had the manual training for the students. And the 6th grade
right.
class, your 6th grade classroom
We
was
used to call it, they called it the chicken coop.
Chicken coop,
That's
yeah.
right. It was a
right, it was
little
big
building.
Yeah. Eileen, unfortunately, we have come to the end of our hour. And there are so many more things that I'm sure that we can talk about, but for the time being, we want to thank you for all that you have shared. This is the one spot that I wanted to be sure to get because we go back almost to the beginning of the state of Ohio for the Sam Lucas and the Long Farm, which is down there where you live at the end of the Connecticut-Western River. Again, thanks, Eileen.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Right.
Although I dreaded it, but now I've
You enjoyed
enjoyed
it.
it.
Thank you.